an emergency?
I need somebody in my apartment. My son is overdosed.
Yeah, I'm gonna lift him up.
90 to 95% of our calls are drug related.
He's not breathing. He's not breathing.
It's really sort of Russian roulette at this point as to what's inside.
Good evening, I'm Miranda Combs and welcome to Wkyt Investigates. Tonight, the state of addiction in Kentucky. There's not a single person in this state that hasn't been in some way affected by the drug epidemic, including the people that work behind me, and also the first responders that bring overdose victims to hospitals across the state. First responders are seeing the brunt of the epidemic by not only trying to save lives, but also trying to understand the addiction.
We don't always get this close to police evidence, but our scheduled sit-down with Kenton County Police landed us in the middle of a death investigation. These plastic and paper bags hold the clues of something all too familiar to this force.
A female, I believe in her 50s, known heroin user.
We did end up getting that sit-down interview, but it ended up being on the second overdose run of the day.
It's an unfortunate reality. You know, why this area and why that prevalent in this area, you know, that's for somebody else other than me to determine.
Something about our cameras usually stops the action. Ride-alongs with police are almost always an automatic quiet shift for officers, but not today.
The sheer prevalence of it, 90 to 95% of our calls are drug-related.
Christopher Haddle has been an officer with Kenton County PD for 21 years. You can tell by the way he navigates the narrow back roads, this is familiar. But what he's seeing on calls lately isn't familiar. It's frightening.
It just says to me that this job is even more dangerous than having a gun pointed at you or having somebody try to hit you with a car. It's just another indirect danger that we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Specifically, fentanyl.
If we get exposed to those, you know, they're actually dangerous from an airborne standpoint.
A drug he and fellow first responders are seeing mixed with heroin, and sometimes it's just straight fentanyl.
Then how did you take it? You snorted it? Okay.
This call is exactly what first responders fear.
Fentanyl. She admitted to snorting it. Ma'am, do you have any more fentanyl around you? Did you use everything you had? Or we found some residue to support what she said, that she crushed it and snorted it.
That means any of the people around her could have been exposed.
The needle isn't just the hazard anymore. It's substances, it's residue, it's whatever could be laying around. That can be absorbed into our skin or anybody's skin. And that's a danger.
At a time when the drugs are getting more and more deadly, the ripple effect is hurting those that are there to help.
But yes, deep down it gets frustrating.
If a patient decides to be taken to the hospital, many times they will be back out on the street in a matter of minutes and back to their addiction. Others, though, will stay in the hospital for months.
Okay, I'm gonna lift him up. Oh.
A heart disease has taken over patient loads for cardiologists all over the state. Endocarditis is an infection in the heart valve that happens when dirty needles are used. Endocarditis is no joke. It can easily kill, and if it doesn't, many times open heart surgery to replace the heart valves and weeks of antibiotics are required. The majority of patients are typically in their early 20s. This has become new territory for cardiologists.
These infections get on these valves, they stick to these valves, and then with time, these infections progress and they actually destroy the valves. It just kind of breaks your heart that these young people are doing this to their bodies.
The University of Kentucky has started a new program for patients that are staying in the hospital for long periods of time for endocarditis. They're starting rehab with medication-assisted treatment, hoping if they start it while they're in the hospital, there'll be a better chance that they'll continue once they leave. There are many kinds of treatment, and we've learned one thing doesn't work for everyone. But we found something that worked for one man at the Isaiah House, a rehab facility in Washington County. They used the Bridge device, which is an instrument cleared by the FDA for acute pain treatment. It's said to bring almost immediate relief to an opioid detox. This man is still having success after 6 months. Still to come on WKYT Investigates, the problem is so bad we get calls about it all the time. Overcrowded jails, and county and state officials can't seem to agree on a solution. And later, it feels like heroin would be the most used drug in Kentucky, but an old name has made a new, more potent appearance. Jail overcrowding. We get messages from viewers daily about the conditions in county jails, and jailers are happy to tell you how crowded their jail is. But many jailers don't have an answer to the problem. Also, the state is adding to it by not being able to take their inmates into state custody. Most jailers will tell you this all goes back to the drug epidemic.
Everything in here is getting another chance, probably to be something different than what it is. The people in here are trying for another chance, too.
There's kind of a irony to it. Yeah, it's kind of a metaphor for life, I guess.
Lincoln County Jailer Rob Wilson has about 10 inmates work in this recycling center.
The primary reason they do it is to get that good time off their sentence. It gets them out quicker.
That's something he needs right now.
This is cell 119. It's designed to hold about 8, and it's probably got 12 to 13 in it right now.
This old jail in his county technically has 72 beds.
It's a dinosaur. Now to build a new facility, you have to have a minimum of 150 beds.
During our visit, there were 163 inmates.
So right now, your county jails are kind of stuck in the middle.
This is not specific to Lincoln County, but this jail is a good example of the 83 other county jails across the state, overflowing and out of answers. A lot of the overflow is pouring down from the top.
The state lacks the space to take them from the county jails into state custody.
State inmates give you money,
Correct.
so it's a double-edged sword.
Most definitely.
Wilson gets $31.34 a day to house a state inmate. It helps, but it doesn't make anything around here better. It's not enough money.
And we are with them. We are singing from the same sheet of music. We've been talking about this problem for a long time.
Justice and Public Safety Secretary John Tilley says the drug epidemic, low felony thresholds, and bail inconsistencies all pile up here.
Right now we have had as many as 25,000 state inmates, almost. This 1 month this year we had as many as 25,000 state inmates.
And about 12,000 state beds. The rest stay in county jails, but the overflow is too much.
Are we headed back to private prisons?
We're in negotiation with a private prison company that owns 3 sites here, the same 3 where we terminated those contracts some time ago.
Tilley advocated to end the contract with the Nashville-based CoreCivic a few years ago. He says they didn't need the headaches and risks of private prisons. Now, the same group is probably coming back.
We're holding a hard line on we want to make certain that our relationship with them is one which benefits Kentucky. We don't see the same problems we saw, years ago with the use of private prisons.
Wilson doesn't want private prisons. He does want the money private prisons make off the state, which is double what he gets.
To me, it's flesh peddling, basically is what it is.
The reason that per diem for county jails is lower, they don't have the physical space, certainly not the fault of anyone there. Jails are not set up for programming. So we're actually having to pay more because these private prisons do have space for programming.
Wilson has had to create space outside his jail, teaching inmates accountability and using what he has and making the best of it.
The state has now signed on with a private prison group, CoreCivic. They own 3 private prisons in Kentucky. They're now going to be working with one of the prisons, taking inmates out of the Kentucky State Reformatory, their biggest problem as they see it right now. This won't really help with the overcrowding issue in county jails, though. Most county jails also don't have room for substance abuse treatment. But Kenton County's jail got a head start and built a prison around the growing drug epidemic. The recidivism rate, meaning the percentage of inmates that end up back behind bars, is around 70%. However, 70% of inmates in Kenton County that go through an intensive substance abuse program while in jail aren't going back to jail after a year.
Over here, at least we get a chance to look at what we've done, think about it, maybe make some changes, so when we get out, we give ourselves a better chance to stay out.
The man who runs the substance abuse program in the Kenton County Jail is also a recovering addict.
I had to understand that, and all it took was somebody to just care about me.
It's a new trend among those in recovery. Peer counseling is a booming business in Kentucky. This is a class to get certified to be a counselor for those in recovery. More and more certification classes are popping up across the state as more and more people find recovery and want to help those still in addiction know there is hope. Still to come, we thought fentanyl would be the strongest opioid we'd see, but that's not the case. Find out what those who have to test the drugs are doing to stay safe. Last year, more than 1,400 people died of a drug overdose in Kentucky, and there's fear that this year the numbers will be worse. The problem with heroin is many times it's mixed with fentanyl. And just when we thought fentanyl would be the worst thing that we'd see, more potent versions of fentanyl have come out, even making the state forensic lab in Frankfort change their protocols.
We often talk about how the drug epidemic affects everyone. Well, we mean it.
We've had this for almost a year. Everyone's trained in it, which is kind of wild.
Wild because these are drug chemists. They stay outfitted in gloves and masks to protect themselves from what they're testing. They shouldn't need an overdose antidote on standby.
Which is insane. I would have never thought 5 years ago that we would need naloxone here in the laboratory, but we do.
This stuff, this powder, is so dangerous, it's deadly.
About 30,000 cases a year, so about 4% of those had fentanyl in there last year.
And that went from nothing.
From 0.1%.
Just how many years ago?
Yeah, just 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah, it doubled, more than doubled for several years in a row, and now we're at about 4% of our cases have fentanyl.
And within the fentanyl family, there's a new disturbing analog, acryl fentanyl. There's some inside this syringe that's now a part of a death investigation. The thing about acryl fentanyl is it's so potent, naloxone, that drug hanging on the wall in the lab and the one used by first responders and ERs to reverse an opioid overdose, may not be enough.
Relying on that naloxone is kind of a dicey proposition at this point. A few hundred milligrams, or is it just?
Jeremy Triplett's forensic lab in Frankfort is seeing about 5 cases of acryl fentanyl a month. Head over to UK's ER. Now, they aren't in the business of identifying specific analogs, but they can spot trends. And what they're dealing with now is making it harder to save lives.
It's taking a lot more to generally wake people up than it normally would in terms of naloxone and the antidotes.
3 years ago, there was a relatively easy fix to this, and that's changed.
What we're seeing now is an increase, at least again anecdotally, an increased uptick of people that come in that get a dose of naloxone, and that wears off and they fall back asleep, and they get another dose and they fall back asleep. Sometimes they get a third dose, or they get put on a continuous infusion of it even. And that, when I was a resident, you know, maybe 5-6 years ago, was occasionally it would happen, but it certainly wasn't the norm. And now you could kind of count on it happening at least fairly frequently with fair regularity.
What's next?
Who knows? Who knows? I hold my breath and wait for the next thing that's going to come down the pike.
First readings and return
From
to the
a
Judiciary
state
Committee.
policy position, Van Ingram says House Bill 333 caught these analogs ahead of time by making them all Schedule I controlled substances.
I hope our federal government is pushing back hard against the Chinese to control their chemical supply, because it seems to be that they can get whatever they want whenever they want it to make whatever they want.
And it's back here in this lab where they are filtering through what's coming in. Triplett says it wasn't long ago you could walk by any of these chemists and they could tell you by looking at something what it was. Not anymore.
There's no consistent way it looks. There's no consistency in what's inside in it. We see the whole gambit. Yeah, it's scary. It's probably the scariest from a drug perspective that I've seen since I've been here in 14 years. It's really sort of Russian roulette at this point as to what's inside.
You might be surprised to hear that heroin isn't the most abused drug in Kentucky. It's actually crystal methamphetamine. In southern Kentucky, they are overrun with crystal meth. It's cheaper than heroin and easy to get. This is different than the old meth days, though. The new stuff is much more potent. Crystal meth makes up 1 out of 3 cases at the state forensic lab.
This is what you're seeing all the time?
Yes. Probably every day of the week.
And here's the proof on the table.
Yeah. Every day of the week.
I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, everywhere we go, it's crystal meth, crystal meth.
Coming up, man's best friend put in a scary spot while on the job. How police are trying to protect their canine companions from overdose. We said there's not a person in the state that hasn't been affected by the drug epidemic. But it's not just people. Canine officers or drug dogs are sometimes the first to sniff out a scene and the first to smell danger.
If we're not taking calls for service, we're back here training. All the time.
Ozzy is pretty new to this.
Sit. Up. Come on. Atta boy.
He's learning.
Come on. Atta boy. Hey, come here. Come on. Hey, come back this way. Hey, look here. Look here. Hey. No. Come back this way. Look. Hup. Atta boy.
How to save the public by locating drugs. It looks like fun, and hopefully soon he'll be just as good as the canine he replaced.
Atta boy, Oz. Sit. Shook it out, puppy.
Last year, we went along with Lux. He was fast, nimble, and aware of one thing.
What is this right here? See that on that seat right there? Yep.
Drugs. But Lux is retired, so Officer Chad Karsner is starting over, and it's a different ball game.
When I had Lux on the street, it was at a point in time where fentanyl hadn't really hit the market like it has now as far as what heroin use was concerned. And so we didn't necessarily have to worry about your drug dog walking up and hitting the cars full of fentanyl as what you do now. So I have to worry about this with Ozzy.
Working with Ozzy can have deadly consequences these days, more so than in the past.
Absolutely, yes, because he's right there. His nose is on the car or on the package, you know, before I'm 6 feet away, you know, at maximum I'm 6 feet away from him. So I have to worry about what's going into his nasal passages before it ever hits me.
Drug dogs overdosing on the job is happening. 3 overdosed in Broward County, Florida. Had to be rushed to the vet. Agencies all over the country are coming up with protocols in case of a canine overdose. Some are using injectable Narcan. Lexington is using the nasal spray.
The Narcan should work.
It should work.
But you don't know.
We don't know. We don't know. I'm not aware currently, you know, I myself am not aware of any agencies in and around here that have used Narcan on their canine partners that I'm aware of.
Latest reports statewide show fentanyl is involved in almost half of fatal overdoses in Kentucky. It's out there and can't always be seen until it's too late.
How I talk to people before I run their car to make sure that they understand that there's a life, the dog's life at stake here, before I ever walk up there, because it's important to me. He is just a third-party participant in this whole thing. He's extremely innocent in this whole thing.
Although these two have only been a team for 4 months.
There's a whole lot of crazy in this dog right here. Hey, look here. Hey, don't eat that.
There's already a lot of love.
He's wearing me out.
Is this constant with him?
This is constant. We need defection 24/7. This is how it is all the time. It's 100 miles an hour in 4 directions.
It's like a toddler.
It is. Ozzy.
But the love translates to a mutual respect, and because of that, a pressing need to protect them from something they can't always see.
We need to be all in for these dogs because it'll kill them. It'll kill them quick. That's mine.
Finally tonight, a new restaurant in Lexington is helping recovering addicts get back on their feet by giving them jobs. Deviate Kitchen opened in late August. 90% of the employees are currently in recovery, living in rehab centers in Lexington and the surrounding area.
I just hit a bottom. I was just tired of it. I couldn't do it on my own. I needed the accountability. I needed some structure.
It's amazing what a little bit of success, building your self-respect could be through just working hard and being good at what you do. That's what I hope.
Thank you for joining us for Wkyt Investigates. We hope you have a good night.